On today's episode,
pause, longer shaft.
Yeah, buddy.
None of this actually makes sense to me. Welcome back to another video, everyone, and we have something very cool that we're going to be doing in this video. I'm taking a little bit of a mental break from wiring this entire car and trying to get it running, and we're going to get a little bit of a dopamine hit. So we have a cool project that we're going to do. As you guys may or may not know, I have an E30. E30s can come with an optional, on the coupes at least, pop-out vent windows. These are manual from the factory. You have to go back here and pull that latch to open and close them. I think that's a little too tedious, so we're gonna make them powered. So I'm by no means the first person to do this project, but I think I am gonna be the first person to do it this way. I've seen other people do it on different cars. I've seen people do it on E30s where they use like E46 motors, but they're kind of big and clunky and they go like up here on the shelf and they kind of stick in the way, and I don't really like the way they look. So I have picked up these. These are window motors out of a Dodge Grand Caravan from like 2001 to 2020 or something like that. And they're a little bit different than the E46 ones. The E46 ones are linear, so it just is a simple push and pull, which is very easy for mounting it to the window. But again, that means they have to go there and they kind of stick on the shelf and they're ugly. These are rotational. So basically the way they work is they went up in the quarter C-pillar like this, and as they rotate, this pushes the window out and then this pulls the window back in. And so since I have some C-pillars here where the OEM ones actually mount, I figure this is a good solution. Now, there are a multitude of issues that I'm gonna have to overcome. So the first of which being is just simply mounting it to the pillar. That's not gonna be too difficult. These have a completely flat mount on the back, which is another reason why I got them. I mean, you can see they're completely flat up against this. So I should be able to just throw a couple riv nuts in and that should solve it once we get the placement correct. That I'm not worried about. The main issue I'm worried about is figuring out the mechanism of attaching to this, which I'm not sure if you can tell, it's very bright out here. It's hard for me to see on the phone. This is the female end of a ball joint socket. So I can get a male ball joint end that goes through and will stick out kind of like this with either a threaded or non-threaded end. But with the motor having to mount like, okay, so we're gonna do it like this. This essentially is gonna be like what's on the pillar, and the glass is gonna be right here, just for y'all's demonstration. So this ball joint is gonna have to be threaded out like this, but then I'm gonna have to have something come this way to push against the window. I have a couple theories. I've been scouring, I forget what the website's called, but they have tons of different hardware and stuff like that, trying to come up with a solution. I think I may have one. I'm gonna order a few different things, and when we come in, we'll just test them, because you can see by this hole that it mounts with just like a bolt that goes through here. I don't know if I have it readily available. I don't think so, but it's essentially just like one of these screws that goes in and bolts to like a big flat like washer nut that goes on the back here, sandwiches together with a lock washer to keep everything tight. So I want to try and keep that mechanism, because I don't want to try and adapt anything else to this and I want to try to avoid shattering the glass, obviously. So I know that system works, so I want to try and keep that as close to OEM as I can. What I'm thinking is do male-ended ball joint coming off of here, and then depending on the length, I'm gonna have to get some sort of like a pause, longer shaft or something like that, because the way this is, like, this is technically the fully open position. You could tell it's like almost flush with the mount. I'm not sure exactly how it works on the Grand Caravan. I don't know if these are like mounted this way where this is the open position, it sticks out a little bit more, which I've thought about doing, but then I have to make some mount to clear like all the motor and everything like that. It's gonna be easier to just mount it this way, and then that just means I need like a longer linkage to go from here to the glass side, because as it is, with this thing fully open, if I just attached it right here, it wouldn't even open this. It doesn't, the throw on the motor is not long enough the way I want to mount it to open the window at all. So I need to come up with probably about 1.5 to 2 inches of an extension arm to add to that throw to get it to actually pop the motors out, the windows out, excuse me. Now I've done a little bit of work and a lot of research. So what I showed you guys in the last video is I've already got an OEM Switch mounted here. So these are going to be for my actual front and left and right front windows, and then I'm going to be using this one for these vent motors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually tie both of the motors into one switch. That way it's a simple open and close, and it opens and closes both of them at the same time. I figured that would be not easier, but nicer, because then I could just hit one button and they fly open, one button they fly close. And if you guys are wanting to do this mod, I'm going to be putting links to everything that I used, resources, everything down in the description, so be sure to check that. Here are those mounts that go on the window that I was telling you about. So this is on the outside of the window, and then this is just a little screw that goes on the inside. So that's all it is. Tell I've been doing some of the wiring off camera just because it's boring and it's a lot of me just like splicing and then researching, because I don't know really anything about electrical. It is by no means my strong suit, so it's a lot of me just like doing one thing, then looking at my phone for 30 minutes, making sure I'm doing the right thing. So let me run through this real quick though. So if I remember correctly, this is either 12 volt keyed or constant. And then I have going from this switch, which is basically, it's like the open and the close trigger. So it's gonna go to one of the relays is one of the wires, one of the relays is the other wire. So it's gonna tie into this, and then these relays are going to go off of this last prong onto the motor itself, which I obviously haven't done because I don't know how much wiring I'm going to need. And then I have power going through a fuse, going to the first relay, which is piggyback to the second one. And then I have basically the exact same thing for the grounds. So I have the grounds piggyback together, and then this loose ground wire that's just going to go to a clean part of the chassis essentially. So, none of this actually makes sense to me. I'm just looking at wiring diagrams and how to wire stuff like this. So fingers crossed it works. I actually feel like I did a really good job on the wiring itself. I just don't really know if it's actually going to work. It should. So what we need to do now, first of all, is clean out all this crap. I have no space to work. So I'm going to grab a couple empty boxes and get this thing cleared out. And then we're going to go up into here, get that other side torn out, and then we need to cut the headliner out so that we can actually get to the metal back behind there, and then see about what it's going to take to actually mount this to the C-pillar. So now let's go ahead and work on getting those all cut off. So now I can at least see what I'm looking at as far as trying to mount these things. That is tightly mounted against there. So now what I want to do is actually go on the outside because I think, well, no, I think it'll be easier on the inside. But I want to measure the throw because like I told you, this is the close position. And I don't know if you guys can see, but it's not even, I mean, it's close to touching the dash, but it's, I mean, glass, but it's still probably a good inch away. So I'm going to open the window as far as I think I want it to go and kind of measure that distance, and that's going to be the distance that I need from like the center of that motor arm to the glass is going to be the distance that I need to extend the throw. It shouldn't be much. I'm thinking probably like a 2-inch extension. That way these can pop out like, I don't know, inch and a half, which would be something like that, which I think is going to be plenty. The main point of me doing this is when you're drifting, you create a lot of smoke, you create a lot of heat. Obviously, I'm running no AC. So by having electric front windows and electric pop-out windows, with the touch of 3 buttons, I can just drop all the windows and have a ton of airflow coming in. It'll keep me cool, keep the smoke out. So that's kind of the reasoning behind all this. And I know what you're thinking, why don't you just reach back and pull the lever? Yeah, that's great and all, but if I have them popped out and like, let's say it starts raining and I'm just driving the car, I don't want to have to pull over, climb in the back, pop the windows in, do all that when I could just hit a button and do it. So this little bit of extra work, I think is going to go a long way. All right, so I did some measurements and it looks like I need about 2.5 inches, I think would be good. And that's from the glass on the farthest point to, which the farthest point is basically like where this mount is, to the arm of the motor, going to the center of the arm, which is assuming that I'm going to be using one of those male-ended ball sockets that will go straight in, because that has to go in the middle of that arm. So Google says this should be an M4 by 0.7. So I'm going to take it to the hardware store and confirm that, because I need to confirm it before I order anything from that website that has all the ball joint ends. And once I do that, I'm just going to play around on the computer, and I might see if I can film some of it, film some of the shopping and mathematics and stuff that I'm doing to try and get that extension. So we're going to play around with that. So we will pick this up in a couple days, and then we should be able to hopefully get the motor mounted to the glass, which would be nice. Then once that's done, we can actually hook it to the switch and the relays and everything else, and should be good to go. All right, we have 2 days later. All of my hardware came in, which is nice. Thankfully, it was very fast shipping. So let me show you guys what I think I'm going to do for the linkage. All right, so here's what I've got. So we've got the motor, yeah. It's gonna be mounted like this, where the glass is right here. So this took a lot of math and figuring out and doing different pieces, because I was having trouble finding like this, for example, would be like fine thread, and then the adapter piece would need to be coarse thread. Anyway, so let's say this is going to be mounted like this. I've got myself a little ball joint that is going to go through the OEM location like this. I'll set this right here. Then I got this male to female adapter. So this is actually M10 by 1.5, I believe, which is what this male end is. So this is going to thread into here like so. And then I got these. I think they're elevator bolts, or they're just large head carriage bolts, something like that. And this is actually going to go on the window side, so it's going to go through the window poking in. I've got rubber washers that are going to go on it, and it threads through here on this side. Is going to sandwich the window like so and go through here. So this is essentially going to be the whole linkage. So it's going to go forward and back kind of like this, I'm hoping. It should, I'm going to try and, I don't know if I'm going to double nut this, or I got to figure out how to make sure that this bolt stays in here, because I don't want the bolt to spin, because the ball joint itself can spin, because this is sealed and it's internally lubricated. So as long as this is solid, as this rotates up and down with the arm, it should just rotate here instead of spinning the bolt. So that's going to be the linkage. So that's what we're going to work on now, since I've already got was it this one? I think it's, since I've already got this motor mounted up in that rear quarter, I've already got the holes drilled and everything like that. I'm gonna put this back up and we're gonna work on putting the linkage in and just kind of make sure that it all lines up where I need to, make sure that this is long enough. It looks like it'll push out as far as the motor can extend and go in and everything like that. I did test and both of my motors do actually work. I'll put a quick video right here. Wow, very cool. So I know both the motors work, and as long as this linkage works, then we're good to go ahead and finish up the wiring and finish up this install. Okay, so I think I have come up with a solution. I am actually going to move the mounts and swap the motors around because they just seem to work better. So this is actually the motor that I was going to use on the other side. And if I get this flipped around, if it goes like up here, then I'm trying to hold you guys and do this. Then this can push out just a little bit, not a ton, and come back in. It's not perfect. This still moves around a little bit up here, but I'm kind of hoping that once I hard mount it, it might be okay. It's still not great. This is not a fantastic solution. I'll be perfectly honest with you guys. I may order like some of the different bolts for the windows and try to get rid of that, that male to female adapter, because I think it's just too long. I did measure and I think I only needed about 2.5 inches, and this is probably about 3.5. So it's too long, but I think I can make it work. I'm really just going for, you know, just being able to crack the windows to get some ventilation in. So it's literally just going to be like a touch of the switch to crack them open. I'm not trying to get the windows to open like 3 inches or anything like that. So I'm going to try and see if I can get these mounted and see if it's going to work over here. It looks like the other side will work as well. But let me get this side first and we'll just kind of see if it'll hold and if it'll work. I think it might work. I'm gonna go ahead and put the last bolt in just so when I test it, it doesn't rip itself out. And then we'll get started on the other one and I'll show you guys when it's done. Yeah, buddy. This side works a lot better. Look how far this one goes out. It has a little trouble coming back in, but it's really not a lot. If I just like let off it hard, it'll come back in. So once that motor is actually turning, it should have no problem. I think this motor will probably end up popping out definitely more than this one. But I don't know. This motor is wanting to push, so it might push it more. We'll have to see. But like I said, I'm just going to basically be like, whenever I want it, I'm just going to like tap the switch a couple times just to get them to pop open. Because if you guys have had windows like these or the quarter vent windows like up front, you know the tiniest little bit of airflow makes a world of difference. So I'm not looking to have these things pop out a ton. It's just going to be something nice to have instead of getting back there and like manually opening them. That's going to be it for tonight though. I'm going to chalk this up as a huge win. I don't want to dive into the wiring yet and screw something up and possibly ruin today's dopamine hit, as that's the entire point of this video. So tonight I'm going to get on the computer and I'm going to go over all my wiring again and make sure I know exactly what I'm doing when wiring these to the relays and the switches, and we're going to get them in here with the center console. I don't think we're going to be able to mount the center console because I'm going to have to trim it for the handbrake and stuff like that, but we'll at least get it back here and like hook the switch to it and see if it works. We'll hit that switch and see if these things fly open. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier when I was comparing the two motors, but the reason why they're slightly different is it looks like one motor is supposed to be mounted like upside down and then the other one is right side up, because both of the arms are like going the same way on each other, but the motors are inverted. So that makes it a little complicated for me because with the way I have to mount it, I can't exactly mount them inverted because these were from a Grand Caravan. You know, Grand Caravans, they're massive. There's tons of space, so they could basically do whatever they want. They can mount one upside down and one this way. I just don't really have the luxury of doing that, but I think it's going to be good enough. So I'm looking forward to powering these things up tomorrow, so I will see you guys then. I'm going to head in the car, so hopefully if it starts raining, we should have everything we need and we can just kind of hunker down in the car. All right, now that we're all set up, let me try and explain this the best I can, because I'm not the best with electrical, as you guys probably know, but I think I understand. So Oh shit, this one's crimped. I don't know if that'll work. Anyway, so I've got this set up with the switch and the 2 relays. These relays are bridged together. So basically what I have to do is I have 1 terminal left on here. It's pin 30. So what I have is I'm going to use one of these little pin connectors, and it's going to go on here. And just like some of these other ones, I'm going to have 2 wires going into them. One is going to go to motor 1 and one is going to go to motor 2. And then on the second relay, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So it's going to go on there. There's going to be 2 wires coming off, and they're going to go to the other wires on each of the 2 motors. So basically, one of the relays is essentially going to be like the open, and then the other relay is going to be the close for the motors. And then I have to run the keyed hot off of, I believe, this fused wire, and then going to this on the switch, I believe, is the constant hot. I might have those 2 mixed up. This might be the constant hot and the switch is the keyed hot, one of the 2. But we have those to do. So since this is obviously going to be like way at the front of the car, I'm going to need a lot of wire, which I thankfully have. I think I might switch to this yellow wire to switch it up, because otherwise on the relays it's red and black. So yeah, we'll do this, and then we'll know that the yellow is the motor wire. Or I might do yellow like and red, or yellow and blue, or something like that. Switch it up. It doesn't really matter. What I think I want to do is just have them run together. So I don't know if you guys can see this motor over here, but I'm gonna have the wire go here across this shelf back over here to tie into this one, and then just run along the passenger door sill right here. I could have them go both sides and then in, but with how much wiring is already under the dash, I don't really feel like adding more to it. So I think I'm just gonna go ahead and start. Let me do something like this. I'll like tie it around so it'll hold. And then we'll start laying out how much I think I might need for this one. Okay, so I'll leave that there so that way we know that's the wire going there. I think this will probably be more than enough. If not, I have plenty more wiring. That is not an issue. I don't know if I told you guys, and if you're wondering, I'm using 14 gauge wire for basically everything. All right, guys, in theory, I think I have it wired up. So I've got both those wires attached. Ignore all this mess. It's not obviously done yet, but I've got everything hooked up. I've got a ground right here. I believe I've got everything on the switch. I've got the fuse constant going back to the battery. I've got the keyed somewhere right here tied into the keyed on the radio. So I guess I've got the battery hooked up. Let's hear some humming. I don't know. So after I stopped filming last night, I messed around with the wiring some more, and I realized my issue was that on this switch, my power wires for the relays and window motors were wrong. So I had them basically next to each other right here, and I took it off and did some testing, which I will actually show you guys what I did right now. So first of all, I'm going to take these off. Okay, so now that I've got the keyed wire, what we can do is take this one. So right now I just did it and opened it. Oh, that didn't close all the way. There we go. All right, and then we could take the other wire, as we can see, and put it on this one, and boom. I still have the issue of this one not working. which I think is just something messed up in my wiring somewhere. So that's what we're gonna tackle right now. But otherwise, we've just about got this thing. Okay, so I'm running into more and more issues the more I dive into this. So it turns out, it looks like this motor that was here was actually working. It's just going the opposite direction, which is not a big deal. I could just swap the wires around. But the problem is with the linkages. It's binding up. It's too much force for it to overcome. Like I was saying, the driver's side was really good and the passenger side isn't, because it's having to like curl and go over, and it doesn't have enough power to do that. So I'm gonna have to either rethink the ignition or try to rebuild that motor arm in such a way to make it easier so it's not having to go like up and then over and then forward. Also, I've been tapping into, I'm not gonna look through that. Somewhere in there is the radio wire, which is what I've been tapping into for the keyed hot. Apparently there is no keyed hot for the radio. It's just a constant hot, because when I turn the key off and have everything connected, the motors are trying to go back and forth constantly, and hooking a test light to it, it just has constant power even with the key off. I've dug through most of this wiring down here to try and find a keyed hot that isn't in use, and I can't even find one. I don't know why, but I have this other pair of window switches down here that somehow came on another harness that's different than these window switches, you could tell. Those window switches have power. These do not for some reason. I tested every single wire under there, keyed on, constant on. There's just no power whatsoever. So I'm gonna have to do some digging on that. We have to rewire a couple things, and we have to somehow figure out something for that motor. So on that note, we are going to be picking this up in the next video with a part 2, which I wasn't really planning on, but you know, sometimes things happen and I want to do this right. And I want to have a bunch of good information for you guys if you want to do this at home. So we're going to pick this up in part 2. It's already late Saturday afternoon, so I got to get this video edited and uploaded anyway. So I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you all so much for watching. Peace.